Islamic dogma creates a cult of death, a cage for women, and a curse against knowledge.
Her words incite outrage, make her the target of constant death threats, and force her to travel with round-the-clock armed bodyguards.
There is a threat from radical Islam that it is spreading, that people here are being really very complacent.
To many in the West, 37-year-old Hersi Ali is a defender of Muslim women's rights, the millennium's Salman Rushdie. But to most of the Islamic world, she is an infidel. In her autobiography, Infidel, Hersi Ali describes her childhood as a Muslim in Somalia, her escape from an arranged marriage, and her asylum in the Netherlands, where she rose to become a Dutch member of parliament. Based today in Washington, D.C., Hersi Ali is risking her life to expose radical Islam,
Allahu Akbar,
a religion that she says subjugates Muslim women to lives of slavery, suffering, and submission. Submission is the title of a film Hersi Ali wrote and co-produced in Holland. It reveals Quranic verses that condone the beating of women.
I feel at least once a week the strength of my husband's fist on my face.
Forced marriage and punishment for victims of rape.
Each time my uncle comes to see me, I feel caged like an animal waiting for slaughter.
Muslim clerics called it a blasphemy worthy of death.
I had taken verses from the Holy Quran. The verses are considered to be holy in themselves, and I had written them on the surface, the most contemptible surface, the skin of a woman.
After the film's release, its director, Theo van Gogh, was assassinated on the streets of Amsterdam, shot to death, his throat slit, and a knife stuck in his chest with a letter listing Hersi Ali's crimes against Islam. But Islam's crimes against women are what concern Hersi Ali. She says the Muslim obsession with virginity is behind the brutal practice of female genital mutilation.
There are no sound hadith or sayings of the Prophet with 100% certainty that he condoned or he urged girls to be mutilated, genitally mutilated. But if you look at the list of countries where female genital mutilation is practiced, and especially those where it happens for more than 90% of the female population, you'll see that they're all Muslims. That's very interesting.
Like 98% of Somali girls, Hersi Ali and her sister suffered the mutilation, without anesthesia, at the hand of their own grandmother.
If you survive it, you have urinating is painful, menstruation is painful, sex is painful, giving birth is painful. So, you end up leading a life of pain.
But Hersi Ali says she doesn't blame her family. It is Islam that teaches the subordination of women.
So my grandmother's conviction that I had to remain a virgin, that I would not find a husband if I wasn't circumcised, that I would therefore be a piece of vulnerable sheep fat on the streets, that is inspired by her beliefs in Islam.
Hersi Ali can cite verses from the Quran instructing husbands to beat their wives, and she says Islam's leader set the original perverse example.
The Prophet Muhammad married a 6-year-old child and consummated that marriage when she was 9. Child brides are rampant in Muslim countries.
Though a small minority of Muslim women support her work, Hersi Ali says most cannot or will not speak against the faith.
There are many who fear change. When you run off and there's no system of protection.
Hersi Ali renounced Islam after 9/11. Her response to Osama bin Laden's calls for jihad, not rantings by radical elements who hijacked the religion, she says, but hostility rooted deep in the Quran.
These infidels were now in Muslim land and they were shedding Muslim blood. And if you shed Muslim blood, all other Muslims are obligated to join in that war. Now, he was making all these quotations. He was getting them from the Prophet Muhammad.
Hersi Ali says that's a problem for Westerners like President Bush, who call Islam a great religion.
I can disagree with President Bush and say he's wrong. He has no idea what he's saying. And he must prove that it's great. And he won't come and behead me. He won't throw me in jail.
And that's not the case in most Muslim nations, she says. She contends Islam is incompatible with democracy. It tramples on human rights and denies freedom of speech. In Washington, Hersi Ali challenged journalists to question the tenets of the faith.
This is what I'm trying to tell journalists. What Muslim leader in any country can you criticize as a citizen of that country, as a visitor, as a journalist, without getting into trouble?
Hersi Ali's views have won her dangerous enemies. She says the threat of radical Islam is real, and she's urging Westerners to resist the culture that oppresses women and schools children in hatred, or the consequences could be severe.
If we don't push back, then like Turkey, like the Turkish secular people, one day we will wake up to an Islamic reality, and that's not what I want.
A solitary voice in a life or death debate, the former Muslim says despite the death threats, she will continue to speak out in the battle over the values of the West versus those of Islam.
Because freedom is also worth dying for and fighting for.
Melissa Charbonneau, CBN News, Washington.